This is Street Knowledge with Chris Graham.
Welcome to the podcast. Chris Graham and Zach Pereles. We're going to talk some UVA basketball. The NCAA Tournament Selection Committee has done its job. Virginia will play Gardner-Webb on Friday afternoon in Columbia, South Carolina. I'm heading down there. Actually, we're going down on Thursday. Scott German and I will be heading down on Thursday. But it's Monday. You need to get you ready for this week. Another 116 game for Virginia. Another good 16 seed in Gardner-Webb. Zach, tell us what you know about Gardner-Webb, the Running Bulldogs.
Yeah, you mentioned it. They're a good team. They are the highest rated 16 seed according to Ken Palm. So they'll be tough. They won a pretty solid conference. They beat Radford, which is a good team, a team that made the tournament last year, and then they also beat Chris Clemens and Campbell, and obviously Chris Clemens, the diminutive guard who had such an incredible career. So they've beaten some good teams. They actually beat two ACC teams on the road. They were able to go in and beat both Georgia Tech and Wake Forest. So they're a little bit more battle tested than your typical 16, and they've been able to win some of those battles. They shot the ball exceptionally well in conference play. The one thing that you look at them, just when you look at the stats and look at the numbers, they don't have a single player in their rotation who's over 6'6". So this should be a feast game for a guy like DeAndre Hunter, maybe a Mamadi Diakite, Jay Huff, Jack Salt. UVA should be able to control the boards, and when I talk about that perimeter shooting, that's what UVA defends against the best. They're so good. They were the nation's best three-point defense team, and that'll definitely come in handy against a team like Gardner-Webb.
DJ Laster is the guy. He's only the third leading scorer on the team, but he had a huge game against Radford in the Big South Tournament Championship game. 14 of 17 from the field, 12 of 14 on twos, 2 of 3 on threes. He averages 13.7 points, 5.5 rebounds, and he's the big guy on this team. He's 6'6", 230. You got some insight from a player who's played against these guys. Maybe talk what you learned about Laster and about how the rest of these guys will play both offensively, defensively.
Yeah, you mentioned it. So I talked to former Stuart Hall standout Adam Pickett. Adam and I have been friends for a while now, and I followed his career when he was at Winthrop, which is also a Big South team. Winthrop and Gardner-Webb split their season series 1-1. Gardner-Webb won a high-scoring game to start things, and then later in the year, Winthrop won a high-scoring one earlier in the conference play, and then Gardner-Webb came back and won a lower-scoring game. He talked about Laster as a guy who, he's a really strong player. He's really solidly built at 6'6". He's an inside-out presence. You mentioned he hit a couple of threes in that championship game. He's not really a three-point shooter. He hasn't taken a ton of them this year, but he's actually been able to shoot them at a pretty good rate. He's a little bit of what you would consider a matchup problem. He's a crafty guy in the post. One of the things that Adam and I talked about is that he has a really good pump fake, and that's something that obviously Virginia will doubt heavily and make sure they're prepared for. But he mentioned, he's a good player. He's strong physically. He can mix it up inside and shoot it outside, and he's a good passer. And these Winthrop guards, Adam told me, is they like to get into the paint. They like to probe the paint either with the ball or without the ball. They move off the ball well, so it'll be a tough task, and Laster's a versatile guy and a versatile weapon. So Virginia, if you want to slow them down, that'll be one of the main primary objectives is slowing down Laster.
At 6'6", 230, and he averages about 1.5 3-point attempts per game. So like you said, he doesn't shoot a lot of them, but he can shoot it, and he shoots 45.1% on those threes. Matchup, do you think it's like a more of a Diakite? I mean, Salt maybe is start the game type thing, but Diakite sounds like perhaps a good matchup just because Laster is 6'6", 230, or maybe some DeAndre Hunter early in the matchup. What are your thoughts on who Virginia kind of uses on Laster?
You mentioned Jack Salt as a guy who's been the starter and who actually played well in Charlotte. On both ends, I thought. I think that he'll probably be the guy who starts there. And then I think that you'll want to have length on him, so I think that starts Mamadi Diakite, and I wrote earlier today about his importance and how Virginia's so much better when he plays well, and Virginia really is missing an athletic big man when he doesn't play well. So I think Diakite will be a really important part. I think that they can use Hunter there as well, but I think you want to use Hunter out on the perimeter against some of their talented guards.
Yeah, the talented guards, and we're going to have fun with the one name, who's the guy who scores 18.3 points a game, 48.9% shooting from the floor, 41.4% from three. 6'2" senior David Efeanaye. Gosh, that's as close as I'll get. Jose Perez, 6'5" freshman, 15.1 points, 5.8 rebounds, 44% from the floor, 36.8% from three. They can shoot the three. As you said, those numbers show you that they get in the paint as well, and that, with decent 2-point percentages for guards, and they can rebound. Their guards can rebound. So Virginia will have their hands full with that backcourt.
Yeah, absolutely, and you're right. That name will cause announcers and us problems as well. David Efeanaye, I'm going to go with.
That sounds good. Yeah.
And one of the things that I talked about with Adam is that he's a guy who really does it all. You mentioned the team in general is versatile. It shoots well from two. It can get it going from three. He's really the reason why, because he does it all. He's a good defender, and that's one of the things that Adam was really impressed with, is that he's a great defender. And when he's a guy who can steal the ball really well, has active hands, and can get them in transition as well. And one of the things, I think one of the reasons that I really wanted to talk to a player who's played against him is they pick up the small things that, you can't necessarily pick up from reading the numbers or even just watching a few games. And Adam said that he does a really good job of reading the screen set for him and then either distributing or attacking off of that. We know that Virginia loves to head screens and does a good job there, but it'll be really important to head screens effectively against him. He's a crafty guy, can score in a lot of ways. And you mentioned it, he's a senior guard, and that's what you want when you get into March.
This team will play. The pace is. I wrote a quick preview last night when we first got the bids announced. Medium pace, I'm calling it. Virginia is, of course, the slowest of the slow, right around 60 possessions per game, and you'll see Duke and North Carolina play 75 plus. Gardner-Webb will play. Their average this season 67.1 possessions per game. So they'll obviously faster than Virginia. They prefer that pace. Everybody ends up playing Virginia's pace when they play Virginia, but they like it a little faster pace. But they're not a fast break up and down, run up and down the court kind of type of team. They're, from an efficiency numbers standpoint, they're slightly better on offense than they are on defense. That's where I'm wondering. I mean, it seems to me very vulnerable on defense, this team. They give up 108.2 points per 100 possessions, 253rd in D1, and that's against, of course, that's adjusted, but that's still against a largely Big South schedule. So it would seem like Virginia really has a lot of opportunities to attack this Gardner-Webb team.
Yeah, and I'd agree with that. And I think part of that just comes from the size mismatch. When you think of this team as, 6'6" is tall, and you can be 6'6" and be an effective power forward, but it's tough to be a 6'6" center, especially when you now have guys like Diakite and Jay Huff, who are 6'9" and 7'1" respectively, and able to shoot the face-up jumper as well. So I think really what Virginia has to do, I think the game plan offensively is to get touches in the paint, get their big bodies in the paint, and that includes Ty Jerome, who at 6'5" is going to be bigger than almost any guard he comes across. And then DeAndre Hunter, like I mentioned earlier, and Diakite. This should be a very high volume near the basket game for Virginia. Then on the other end, I think you want to defend the three, and then on the other end get high efficiency looks right near the basket.
This is if you want to call them a hot team, I mean, everybody who gets in a tournament who has to win their way in the tournament has won at least their last 3. And Gardner-Webb's won 8 of their last 9, and they had to win their last 2 on the road. Teams who win conference championships in the big conferences don't have to ever think about that. But they had to go to Campbell and win in the semifinals, and then when that happened, Radford was the higher seed. So the way the Big South does it, they played the game at Radford the next day. They had to beat Radford and did so. So, that's about as battle-tested from that perspective as you can be. They've won 8 of 9, 10 of 12, and they won their last 2 to get in this against the 2 top-seeded teams in Big South play. So they're going in with confidence, and they have to have whatever degree of confidence a 16 can possibly have, because not only are we now in the post a 16 has finally beaten a 1 era, but they're playing the one who lost last year. So, this is a game that certainly the country will be watching, and you've got to think Gardner-Webb is going to go in with as much confidence as a 16 seed can possibly have.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail right on the head. I 100% agree with you there. This isn't a team that's going to come out and play scared, and we mentioned they already beat 2 ACC teams. They played VCU to a 12-point loss. They played Virginia Tech, got blown out there, but they've played big teams before. They started their season VCU, Virginia Tech, and then Furman. Furman was a really good team this year. Ended up missing out on going dancing, but those are 3 really good teams to open the season with. They've played good teams this season. They've beaten a couple major conference teams in the ACC, and they have the experience. You always look at, these teams that maybe are not going to have the physical skills of a Virginia. They don't have the size of a Virginia. They don't have necessarily, the next level prospects of a Virginia. But they do have experience, and they do have guys who won't be scared of this stage. That's kind of half the battle. If you can come in to any game expecting to win, or at least expecting to play well because you've played well against similar caliber teams before, then you can go into games confidently, and that's huge for a 16 seed.
Any thought to? I'm thinking back to a couple of years ago. Virginia opened the NCAA tournament against UNC Wilmington, another team that a small conference team that UNC Wilmington from the CAA. That I don't know that any of their players were over 6'6" or 6'7". Devontae Kaycock was the one who, at that time, that was when Kevin Keats was still at UNC Wilmington, and he was like an 80% shooter from the field. They used him so well, and that game we remember. A lot of UVA fans remember. UNC Wilmington led by 14 or 15 in the first half. Virginia came back, eventually won the game, but that the size differential actually didn't seem to be an advantage for Virginia in that game. Tony ended up having to go to a 4-guard lineup for a lot of that game, 5-guard lineup for some of that game. Any thought about Tony, even though Virginia on paper certainly has a huge height advantage in this game, he's been successful this year, certainly. Most of the minutes this year have been 4-guard lineup. Back 2 years ago, going 4-guard was revolutionary. Like, whoa, you're going 4-guard in these games and you're having some success. That's been the base lineup for Virginia for the most part this year. So, your thoughts on rotation for Virginia against a smaller team?
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think we'll see a lot of, it depends really what you consider a guard, but there could be times, and there were even times throughout the season where Virginia kind of went with, 3 guards and Kihei Clark, Ty Jerome, and Kyle Guy, and then actually just went with a kind of a smaller front court of DeAndre Hunter and Braxton Key, and that's really downsizing it to about as small as you can get. But against a team like Gardner-Webb, that's actually still going to have plenty of size. DeAndre Hunter's still going to be the tallest guy on the court. I think in this circumstance, you brought up UNC Wilmington, and I remember that team played extremely fast, was extremely careful with the ball, and I actually pulled out some stats. They were number 1 in the nation in turnover percentage offensively, so they took really good care of the ball. They played really fast, which makes any team really, really tough to plan for. That's not really the case quite as much with Gardner-Webb. They don't play quite as fast. They're not quite as good handling the ball. But again, when you look certainly at lineups, I think your big man this game can either be a combination of DeAndre Hunter and Braxton Key, or you can even look to go with Mamadi Diakite because he's so quick even for his size, so he can go out and switch on those smaller guys.
Okay, so UVA fans listening in don't want to hear us talk about the rest of the bracket because we still have those wounded feelings from last year. But I'm hearing a lot, and I wanted to get your thoughts on this, Zach, as we wrap things up here. Hearing a lot from the analysts who are looking at the brackets across the way, and a lot of thoughts of the South region might be, I hate to use the word easiest because, gosh, there's so much going on in a bracket and that you don't know until they start throwing the ball up in the air. But that Virginia might have gotten a somewhat favorable situation in the South region. I'm sure you've peeked at the other other teams in the region. Your thoughts on that?
I think when you talk about easy teams, it's so hard to it's so easy to look at the numbers or who beat who or what happened here or there. I think that in general, though, you're right. This is not an easy region, but I think it's a little bit more favorable for Virginia because when you look at some of the other top seeds, one of the things that Tennessee, the number 2 seed, prides itself on is how tough it is, and that's exactly what Virginia prides itself on as well. So that would be a reasonable matchup. The Cavaliers have no problem digging in for 30 seconds on defense and making a stand. The 3 seed you have Purdue, that's a team that's basically carried offensively by one guy, and then defensively they want to get after it as well, cause you problems. I don't look at this region as being so much easy as I do as it being just a team made up of tough teams. These aren't the high-flying teams, especially when you go down. Look at the 4 seed Kansas State, the 5 seed Wisconsin. Those are teams that want to make the games flow. They want to make the game tough on you, and they want to do kind of what Virginia does to you, but maybe not with as much offensive efficiency. So I don't know if I'd say it's the easiest. I haven't really dissected the bracket as a whole as much so far. I kind of like to take my time and even watch the games on Tuesday night and Wednesday night before filling it in. So, again, it's maybe, you look at these teams and the names and how they play, and you say this is the easiest, but I'll tell you what, you don't ever want to be stuck in, a 50 to 48 game with, a Wisconsin team that manages to knock down some tough shots and always plays good defense. These teams, Kansas State, Wisconsin, obviously Tennessee with 2 wins over Kentucky, they're really tough teams. They're not really the high-flying, offensively flashy teams, obviously, but you've never, these teams are built to win in March with their defense and timely offense, and that's kind of the formula for Virginia as well. So I think it's you're going to see a lot of tough physical battles over the next 4 games in this region.
Yeah, I wouldn't use the term easy either. I would say favorable for Virginia just because, as you mentioned, so many of those teams play a very similar style as Virginia. And on paper, Virginia maybe is the best. I guess with being the number 1 seed, they are the best at that style of basketball. So you're not talking about you have a game against some high-powered, high-octane Duke-type team with young athletes who are game changers just on their own and completely befuddle what Virginia tries to do or Wisconsin tries to do, that kind of thing. I look at now. I haven't analyzed any of the others either, so I was kind of just repeating what I've been hearing here and there from others. I look at Duke, and that's the only other one I've even looked at with any degree because it was easy to do because you see VCU is potentially sitting there in the second round, and I know VCU is smaller and they don't have Zion Williamson. I guess what Jay Billis keeps repeating. The question is, do they have Zion Williamson? No. Well, then Duke will win that game. But VCU is a tough, hard-nosed team. We saw them play in Charlottesville. They had a lead on Virginia with 7 minutes to go. So I wouldn't want them in the second round, and I wouldn't want Virginia Tech in the third round. Now, Virginia Tech, yes, has a win over Duke, but that was without Zion, and that was also without Justin Robinson, who's now back for Virginia Tech. So, they've got Duke potentially. Of course, it all has to play out, but Duke potentially has a couple of interesting ones on their way just to the final of the East region. I'm kind of glad Virginia doesn't have those 2 teams, honestly. Standing in their way between the regional and the regional final.
Yeah, you obviously never want to look too far ahead, and Virginia fans know that better than anybody does, or maybe anybody even ever will. One of the things that I look at, I'm always, you always subconsciously look ahead because you want to see who has a tough region and where could you look at potential upsets, whatever. But you mentioned that Virginia has a favorable draw, I think, because they've shown the willingness to hunker down and beat Wisconsin or beat a Kansas State. They beat Wisconsin earlier this year. That was a game where they went up by 15 at halftime, and the lead shrunk, but they were never really too much in jeopardy of losing that game. Virginia, if they have to go out and score 70 points to beat a team, they can do that. But also, if Wisconsin wants to slow things down, that can really throw some teams off track, but it won't throw Virginia off track. Virginia will gladly win 70 to 60, and they will also gladly win 50 to 40, and they'll say it's beautiful either way.
So, what can we look forward to? Again, we're talking on Monday. If you're listening to this podcast, we're talking on Monday. The Cavs, the Who's play on Friday. So, what can we look forward to the next few days from you, Zach?
Sure, yeah. So this morning I wrote about kind of 3 keys to Virginia's postseason success, and it was basically 3 players: Ty Jerome, who struggled a little bit in the ACC tournament in Charlotte; Mamadi Diakite, who also struggled, but for different reasons; and DeAndre Hunter, who was very good in Charlotte, but I think should be getting the ball more because he's the guy who can take Virginia to places that they haven't been before simply because he's such a good individual player. Moving off of that, we'll have my discussion with Adam Pickett tomorrow. He gave some really great insight, the insight that you can only get from a player in terms of what these guys like to do down to the tiniest of details. That'll be coming out on Tuesday. We'll be doing some more final thoughts, kind of wrapping up the Virginia season that's been so far, and of course getting into Gardner-Webb as well with a preview on Wednesday. And then Thursday morning, I guess I'll be sending my final bracket your way. Those 11 seeds that have to play in those play-in games, they can be dangerous, and that's why I like to wait until they've played. So sending a bracket your way, you can not look at it at all, or you can copy it word for word. That's up to you. That depends on how much you think I know about college basketball.
Yeah, we've seen, at least VCU went from one of those play-in games to a Final Four several years ago, so that's a smart approach to that. Well, Zach, thank you for what you're going to do to get us ready, and wahoo wah.